Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Monica, for that welcome and for reminding me of the stress in waiting as the move looms. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and their elders past and present, and I would also like to acknowledge the presence of the Minister for Women, Fiona Richardson, who has proven to be, in the 7 months since the inauguration of the government, a true inspiration for all of us in the room and for the government for her dedicated pursuit of her portfolio responsibilities. Turning to the Premier, and while I probably won't take on board all of your complaints at the break around inappropriate development in your suburb, I would like to remind everyone in this room about the significance that he has placed upon this issue. He's declared family violence to be a national emergency. And the statistics, some of which we've heard today, are in fact a fairly stark reminder of that fact. And they do bear repeating. In Australia, more than 1 in 3 women has experienced violence from a partner or ex-partner. It's an extraordinarily high figure. And as the research of VicHealth has revealed, and Cheryl popped it up on the screen, family violence is the leading preventable contributor to premature death and disability of Victorian women under the age of 45, which makes family violence one of the key health issues facing our community today. And its significant impact on children can't go unremarked. They were present at 34% of family violence incidents attended by Victoria Police in 2013-14. Now turning probably to some of the underlying causes, and we've also heard a little bit about that, but again it bears repeating. They're complex, and as you're all aware, and as Gerald pointed out, there's a significant body of evidence that links family violence to gender inequality. The research of VicHealth, some of which we've seen today, has been instrumental in demonstrating the gendered nature of family violence. And the Victorian research corresponds with the international evidence, which demonstrates that in societies that support rigid gender roles for men and women, in which women have less access to leadership, power and resources, the levels of violence against women and children are measurably higher. And we also know that attitudes play a central role in perpetuating gender inequity and shaping the way that individuals, organisations and communities respond to violence. The findings of the 2013 National Community Attitudes Survey reinforce the international evidence that the strongest predictor of attitudes which support violence against women and children is a tolerance for gender inequality. And this finding is true across all demographic variables, including socioeconomic status, geographic location and age. I've actually been thinking a lot lately about attitudes towards women in the workplace. I recently became a male champion of change and have been hosting listen and learn forums where men and women from across the Department of Premier and Cabinet have been sharing their stories, their experiences and their views on women in leadership. The Male Champions of Change group, led by the Australian Human Rights Commission, and congratulations to Kate for being such a powerful leader and advocate for the program, aims to use its individual and collective influence and commitment to ensure that the issue of women's representation on leadership is elevated on the national business agenda. What is really interesting is that in the DPC forums, we have confirmation of the research that entrenched attitudes can shape people's views on leadership and the role of women. What is also encouraging is the universal commitment for everyone who has been exposed to me through the focus group process to make a material effort to understand and address those entrenched attitudes. We're also privileged as the Department of Premier and Cabinet to serve the Minister for Equality and the Minister for Multicultural Affairs. And in both these portfolios there are extensive lessons to be learnt about the link between attitudes and violence and how to overcome those attitudes. Governments have made significant progress in the area of educating and legislating to prevent violence against at-risk groups of people. There's now widespread understanding that racist attitudes can lead to racially motivated violence and that homophobic attitudes can lead the way to hate crimes. We must also change the attitudes and behaviours around gender inequality and address the social, the economic and the political conditions that enable violence-supported activities and behaviours to occur. Now, while government will continue to play a lead role in this area, preventing violence against women is not something that government can do alone. The community, the business sector and the broader community all have a key role to play in preventing violence against women. Now, the government is deeply aware of the nexus between economic wellbeing and social wellbeing. It's intent on driving growth with a particular focus on long-term unemployed, redundancy and youth unemployment. The 2013 NCAS survey found that the majority of Australians have a good knowledge of violence against women and overall do not endorse violence-supported attitudes. But the survey also highlighted some areas of concern, particularly around young people's attitudes to violence and the general population's understanding of the gendered nature of family violence. And these findings are particularly concerning in light of the fact that these sorts of attitudes contribute to violence against women because they influence expectations of what is acceptable behaviour. Now, as the Minister has indicated, there's no absence of reform ambition for this government. And as far as family violence policy is concerned, we're at a watershed moment. Research also shows that the correlation between women in leadership positions and attitudes and behaviours towards women. So over the last 6 months, the government has implemented a number of initiatives that promote women in leadership. They include a cabinet with the most female members in Victoria's history, the establishment of Australia's first dedicated ministry for the prevention of family violence, the appointment of the first female governor of Victoria, a commitment that between now and November 2018, no less than 50% of all future appointments to paid government boards and Victorian courts will be women, and a commitment to develop whole-of-government policies to address gender inequality issues. The government's response to the Royal Commission, as indicated by the Minister, has identified that there are significant gaps in our family violence system, and the Royal Commission's recommendations will guide and direct the government's response. Preventing family violence is core business for government. In light of the link between gender inequality and women's experiences of family violence, every department in government has a role to play in preventing family violence, including those departments that have not traditionally worked in the area. For example, departments that are not directly involved in violence prevention work may nonetheless have a role in promoting and improving gender equality practices and women's leadership positions within their organisations. My own department, the Department of Premier and Cabinet, has a central coordinating role in government policy. And at the end of last year, I was delighted to welcome the Office for Women to the Department of Premier and Cabinet. This shift to the department is significant. It emphasises that preventing violence against women requires central government coordination and engagement across the length and breadth of the public service. Government and the community sector will continue to collaborate on work to prevent violence against women. This collaboration is vital if we are to make significant inroads into preventing violence. Within government, we are clear that if we are to make significant inroads into preventing family violence, our approach needs to be based on the following: absolute buy-in from leaders within government. Leadership is the key to driving a coordinated social policy reform agenda. Long-term commitment. As we all know, bringing about progressive social change is not something that happens quickly. We need to adopt a long-term agenda for preventing violence against women. We need to build a robust evidence base through research and evaluation. And the Minister, and I can attest to this from personal experience, the Minister's determination and drive to introduce the Innovative Family Violence Index is the first significant step. We need to have mechanisms for information sharing so that staff in all areas of government have access to the most up-to-date evidence in order to facilitate effective programs. And preventing violence against women requires us all to build and enhance strategic partnerships between government and the community sector, the business sector and the academy. The importance of these partnerships cannot be understated. As well as a moral and social imperative, there's an economic imperative to get the family violence system right, because the demand for policing, court costs and health and community care services continues to grow. This year, the Department of Premier and Cabinet has also been supporting the Premier and the Minister to contribute to national efforts to reduce violence against women. Only next week, the Council of Australian Governments will meet in Sydney, and they've agreed to take urgent action in 2015 to address the unacceptably high levels of violence against women. So just to give you an insight into what COAG, well, I'm anticipating agreement. By the end of 2015, a national domestic violence order scheme will be agreed. Progress will be reported on a national information system that will enable courts and police in different states and territories to share information on active domestic violence orders. And COAG will consider national standards to ensure perpetrators of violence against women are held to account to the same standard across all of Australia. COAG will also consider strategies to tackle the increased use of technology to facilitate abuse against women and to ensure that women have adequate legal protections against this particular insidious form of abuse. COAG has also announced that the Commonwealth and states and territories will contribute $30 million for a national campaign to reduce violence against women and their children. The Commonwealth has also announced an advisory panel to reduce violence against women. Former Victorian Police Commissioner Ken Lay chairs the panel, together with Rosie Batty as Deputy Chair. We're also represented by Julie Oberon, who is bringing significant expertise in frontline service delivery to the panel. This panel will provide advice to COAG, including in person next week, on the agreed priorities and the areas of focus taking it forward. So in addition to COAG's work, the Victorian Government is working with the states, territories and the Commonwealth to implement the national plan to reduce violence against women and their children. The national plan is a 12-year plan for preventing and responding to violence against women and is designed to ensure that we can look back at what has been achieved and refocus on what actions will make the most difference in the future. The long-term focus of the national plan makes it clear that preventing violence against women requires a sustained commitment from all governments. The Department of Premier and Cabinet plays a role in informing the progress of the national plan, in sharing Victoria's learnings with the rest of Australia, and in making sure that Victoria's initiatives to prevent family violence link in with this broader national approach. This level of national attention and collaboration on the issue provides an opportunity for reform that we've never seen before. And the Minister and the Premier have been instrumental in elevating this to the level of a national debate. There's also recognition that strengthening the system that responds to family violence isn't enough. If we're going to put an end to family violence, we need to invest in prevention. While we are rightly recognised as a world leader in the area of preventing violence against women, even in Victoria, there's been a comparatively low investment in violence prevention initiatives. Funding for these initiatives is often short-term and project-based, despite what we know about effective and sustainable prevention approaches being broader-based and long-term. The Victorian whole-of-government submission to the Royal Commission recognises that we need a consistently applied and well-resourced violence prevention framework. We also need specific prevention strategies that target groups that can be hard to reach or that face a high risk of violence, such as culturally and linguistically diverse communities, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and women with disabilities. And it's great to see that this conference has devoted some dedicated time to exploring these particular issues. In closing, I'd like to reiterate the commitment of the Department of Premier and Cabinet to maintaining a focus on preventing family violence and to working closely on this issue with other government departments, with the business sector, with the community sector and with the academy. As I've said, preventing family violence is core business for government. All relevant Victorian Government departments are undertaking work to ensure they're in a position to respond to the recommendations of the Royal Commission, and this conference is a major step towards building the readiness to take our approach to preventing family violence into the future. Thank you.
Authorised by VicHealth, 15 to 31 Pelham Street, Carlton, Victoria.